welcome to the very first episode of the NBA Legacy podcast. As I mentioned in the introducing snippet that I released earlier, today we're going to be covering the 2011 finals, which I'm sure most of you could notice by the title of the episode. The reason I picked this topic to be the first episode of the show is mainly because it actually inspired the idea for this show. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed anytime LeBron James comes up, be it good or bad, somebody has to mention the 2011 finals. Whether he choked, whether he didn't, he played well. Okay, he didn't play well. But one of the posts someone will always make is the picture, and I'm sure all of you have seen it, of LeBron being guarded in the post by J.J. Barea. Now, the thing is, I'm not here to defend LeBron. I'm not sure if you're a LeBron fan, the end, when I get to the conclusion of this topic, that you'll be very happy. But J.J. Barea did not become the LeBron stopper in the 2011 finals. The story of the 2011 finals isn't really remotely about that. That moment of when J.J. Barea switched on to LeBron. It's not about that. It's not. There's much more layers to it. I want to get into those. I want to talk about those moments, whether or not Dallas really deserves to be a footnote in LeBron's story. J.J. Barea didn't guard LeBron James throughout that series, but I want to talk more about what that series was and what it, going back, looking at it and seeing why the Mavericks won, why the Heat disappointed. There are questions I want to answer about this series. Now, I come into this obviously with my preconceived ideas. I watched the series when it happened. I've seen clips and discussions about it ever since. But I want to go back and do a deep dive and look and see what exactly happened. Did LeBron choke? I'm going to start and say that I think he did. I think it's layered, and I think it's actually a little bit understandable why he did. But I want to look into it more. And the overall performance of the Heat team and the Mavericks included. Does that still hold up? Or did he just not play well? Also, I've long had this idea that while Dallas was the better team, that Miami should have won that series. I think it's something most people agree with. But is that true? We forget that Dallas didn't just go through Wade and LeBron. They also stopped a Kobe three-peat and sent the early Oklahoma City Thunder team packing. The team that the next year would rampage to the finals and destroy San Antonio. Another question I want to answer in this series. Where does the 2011 Heat failure rank in terms of failures, right? In terms of finals failures, let's say. They had home court advantage. So they had their 4 of the 7 games at home. And obviously, they were the favorites leading into the series. And they didn't win. So how does that stack up to, say, 2016, where the Warriors blew a 3-1 lead? Or 2004, when the Lakers lost to the Pistons? Another topic people talk about a lot is that this was a one-man show with Dirk Nowitzki. That he just put this team on his back and won a championship by being an unbelievably unstoppable beast. Now, I go into this thinking that's true. I think his run was spectacular and one of the best ever. I want to look in to see how really good his run was. Do we look back and overrate it because he's the only Hall of Fame superstar? Well, I guess you'd say Jason Kidd, certainly Hall of Famer. But at the time, Dirk Nowitzki was the only Hall of Fame talent on the team that was playing at that level. And so does it get overrated, and do we undercut some of his teammates, or was he simply that good? Another topic I really am interested to look into is I think a lot of people conflate the Heat team in different eras with when they were able to add Shane Battier and Chris Anderson and Ray Allen, and don't look back and look at the roster that Heat team had beyond Wade, LeBron, and Bosh in that first year. It's pretty bad. And I want to get into that certainly more when I cover the Heat's road to getting to the finals. When I looked back and saw just, your Mike Bibby, your Zydrunas Ilgauskas on his last legs, Kinda, kinda honestly made me wonder if that I overrated the Heat team because of those three guys, and that we didn't look at this supporting cast of guys that probably wouldn't have played for Dallas, and maybe that Dallas really should get more credit. Also, when I said that earlier about Dirk being the only star, another question I want to look at, especially when I get to the actual final series, is just how good Tyson Chandler was. There's been some talk a lot of times by people who make excuses for the Heat or are LeBron defenders in this series that Tyson Chandler actually was really good. And I remember him being very good in this series, but how good was he really? Was he playing at a star level, at least defensively? Or is it something we just look back on trying to add context to why the Heat failed to beat Dallas? And finally, just how should we remember the series? I think right now the series is simply remembered as LeBron James' worst moment when Dallas snuck by and stole a title that they shouldn't have won because Dirk played well and LeBron choked. I think it's fair to say that is how everybody talks about the series now. Occasionally you'll see somebody talk about that Dallas was a team that shot threes early when a lot of teams were still trying to play big. Mostly, it's this 2011 is about LeBron James and a part of his story, and I don't know if that's correct. I think maybe we should view it more as LeBron having a moment where some of his weaknesses were exposed, and maybe more about how we should look at team building and how you build around a single star, especially a star whose main primary focus is the offensive end of the court, that maybe you should surround them with more veteran type presence and defensive players, like something we didn't see with, say, like Carmelo Anthony in New York. Although I think you could say that 2013 team he had that was the most successful New York Knicks team that Melo played on was actually pretty similar to this Dallas team. That we view the 04 Pistons in a certain way that you can get five really good guys and that can beat a team that is not all together and that's mainly out of stars. That it's this kind of anomaly, but that it does show there is a path to winning a championship. That's not just, stacking superstars. And maybe we don't give this Dallas team its due. And I haven't mentioned Rick Carlisle's name, who does a fantastic job all through the playoffs for Dallas and making the right adjustments at the right time, playing the right guys. Overall, I'm just trying to do my small part in making this conversation a little bit smarter and a little bit more nuanced with context. Because I think this is a series that doesn't get its due and isn't talked about properly. And so with that, let's talk about how we got here. And since Miami is going to be a little bit of a challenge, I think I'm going to start with Dallas, and let's talk about their road to the 2011 NBA Finals. Going into the 2010-2011 season, there were a lot of storylines fans were looking forward to. The Lakers had just come off winning their second title back-to-back by beating Boston in a 7-game NBA Finals series. And LeBron James had joined the Miami Heat, in addition with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh that offseason. Now, we will get to that more when I do Miami's portion of this regular season conversation, but it goes without saying that the Dallas Mavericks were not exactly the NBA's sexiest storyline in the regular season. The Chicago Bulls would emerge, Derrick Rose would emerge as the MVP, and Dallas kind of flew under the radar. No one really talked about them. They had probably two moments that really stuck out when they ended Miami's 12-game winning streak in December, and a loss to the Los Angeles Lakers towards the end of the season that would cement to most people that Dallas wasn't a contending team. The Lakers almost won by 30 points. It pretty much slammed the door on any thought of Dallas doing damage in the playoffs. They would manage to win 57 games that season, but no one really cared. Dallas had lost in the first round 4 of the last 5 years and had fallen apart in the 2006 finals against Dwayne Wade in the Miami Heat and Shaquille O'Neal after being up 2-0. came back the next year, looked like they were ready with a vengeance, winning 67 regular season games to, bam, lose in the first round in 6 games to the Warriors, who made the playoffs that year on the last day of the season. So heading into the playoffs, it left Dallas with a rotation that looked something like this. They would start at point guard Jason Kidd, Deshaun Stevenson, defending athletic 2, would be their shooting guard. Sean Marion, former All-Star small forward, still a great defender. Prime probably slipping away, but still a good player. Dirk Nowitzki, All-Star, best player on the team, but a guy who had many critics at this time, and no one, probably outside of Dallas, really believed much that he was going to be the kind of guy that could lead a team to a championship. Tyson Chandler, guy who'd been drafted high by Chicago, only to find himself bouncing around the league a little bit from Chicago to New Orleans to finally in Charlotte before he got traded to Dallas earlier this season, and kind of seemed like a bit of a bust. Maybe not a guy that was going to fall out of the league, but definitely someone who shouldn't have been drafted as high as he was. Then off the bench, they had Jason Terry, who had been a 6th man of the year as recently as 2009. J.J. Barea, an unproven guard off the bench who super fast, but not really athletically, or maybe not exactly the kind of guy who has the physical stature to stay in the league. Peja Stojakovic, another guy whose prime years had passed him when he played in Sacramento. Could still shoot, but couldn't really guard a lick. Brendan Haywood, who originally they had thought was going to be their starting center next to Dirk, but Tyson Chandler had outplayed him and taken that role. Haywood is less offensively gifted, but more of a bulkier defensive center than Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler could play great defense, but he was a little bit slighter. Jan Mahimny, pre-Washington Wizards contract, didn't really see much action. The original Brian Scalabrine and Brian Cardinal, who was kind of the hustle utility guy off the bench that no one probably knew his name before this playoff run. Corey Brewer, who still hadn't found his place in the league yet, coming off out of college from Florida. I should also mention that on this team was Caron Butler, former All-Star with the Wizards, who had been traded to Dallas previously, but he had had a torn patella tendon and was out for the entire season. He was expected to have been a second scoring option for Dirk and bring some toughness, but he would never do much in Dallas because of this injury. So it's not a bad collection of roster, right? Sounds pretty decent, but it doesn't scare you. No one looks at that roster and thinks, man, they're unstoppable. So with having a rather listless regular season and having a reputation of frankly being soft, when Dallas ended up facing the number 6 seed in the playoffs, the Portland Trailblazers, many people were picking Portland. Now, Portland had had a year where they'd won 48 games. The Blazers looked like a young, hungry team. Dallas had always disappointed. Portland actually had matched up well with the Lakers, which the team that looked like would be waiting for the winner of this series in the second round. Many people were projecting a matchup between the Blazers and the Lakers, and assuming Dallas would just simply be swept aside. ESPN had several people pick the Blazers to upset. Guys like John Hollinger, Michael Wilbon, and Chad Ford all picked the Blazers to upset. And at the time, other than that, the conversation was all about Chicago, Boston, the Lakers, and maybe a little bit about the Spurs. So heading into the first round series against Portland, there were some interesting matchups, right? You had LaMarcus Aldridge, who probably should have been an all-star, even though it was tough with the West that year. The West was extremely loaded. If you go back and look at that roster, it's hard to pick someone off that LaMarcus Aldridge should have replaced. But that was a big conversation at the time. I remember LeBron actually said that LaMarcus Aldridge not making the All-Star team that year was the worst snub in All-Star game history. Not sure about that, but he certainly would have made it in the Eastern Conference. So the big matchup there was going to be Dirk and LaMarcus Aldridge. Even though they wouldn't necessarily guard each other, they both played the power forward position, and that was going to be your two main hubs of offense for both teams. Jason Kidd, once again, would not be exactly guarding this guy a whole lot, but we had a matchup of two old school, slow but super savvy and smart point guards with Jason Kidd and Andre Miller, which actually ended up being fun to watch, going back and watching this film. In the first game, though, actually in the first two games, I would say, the series goes pretty much the way you would expect. Dallas wins 89-81 in game one. LaMarcus Aldridge has 27 points. Dirk has 28 and 10. Jason Kidd has a big 24 points with a bunch of threes he hits, shooting the ball really well. He'd had a little bit of a vacation given to him by Rick Carlisle from Dallas before the playoffs started, and you can totally see, watching the film, that the rest does him a world of good. He was only a couple years away from actually being a coach of a team. He's on his, this is definitely the end of his career, but he plays fantastic. I think one of the most obnoxious things throughout the first two games, actually, is Kevin McHale is the color commentator on Game 2 for TNT, and he's really trying to get this idea of Crash Wallace as a nickname for Gerald Wallace on Portland, and it does not work at all. No one sells it. As far as I remember, this was never a thing. It never caught on. Both games 1 and 2, what you start seeing more is that Dallas is the better team, but Portland is able to push them, make them work, but at the end, Dallas is going to win. It's a theme throughout this series. Portland just doesn't quite have the consistency and the level of smarts to stay with the Mavericks. Now, Dallas will end up winning Game 1, as I said, but also Game 2, 101-89. Dallas pulls away. Good game. Both of these are fun to go back and watch. You can find them on YouTube. But shaping up to be a good series for sure. Not quite the upset I think people were predicting. Going into Game 3, you start really seeing Dallas maybe being a little bit of a different team than people had expected before. Portland actually wins this game, but the Blazers come out super hot, and Dallas fights back, keeping this a close game. Portland doesn't want to go down 0-3, and Dallas really remains poised and keeps it a game throughout. Usually that's what I think you see from really good championship teams, is they will not, even if they end up getting beaten, they make it a game. It's not a blowout where they're done by 25 points in the games, over halfway through it. They are able to manage and continually fight and keep things close. They still have a chance. Definitely shows some grit that those post-Dallas teams that disappointed in the playoffs lacked, where a lot of times you would see them could just fold. The minute there was any kind of resistance, they would fold. Now, I know it sounds like I'm breezing through these first three games, but that's primarily because everyone remembers Game 4, and that's the biggest moment of this first-round series for Dallas, and for Portland, obviously. So now is probably the best time to have the Brandon Roy conversation. I want to do an episode on his career at some point, but at this point it's important to remember Brandon Roy had been an all-star. Kobe Bryant had went out of his way to compliment him, saying he was the hardest player for him to guard in the league. And his career effectively heading to a point where it's going to be over because he has no cartilage left in his knees, both knees. Claims it's basically just bone on bone. It sounds horrible and painful and awful, and his career is coming to an end. So early in the series, he complains that he doesn't get a lot of playing time. He wants to play more, but he can't really go anymore. Every step for him is obviously torture, and he's not a reliable player for Portland. In this game, though, you start really seeing Dallas look like the better team, okay? They're starting to pull away. Looks like they're going to go up 3-1, probably finish this series out in 5 games. They're smarter, better. Dirk's the best player in the series. They're in control and heading towards being up 3-1 and having a stranglehold. At 4:46 left in the third quarter, Dirk checks out and Brandon Roy checks in. Score is Dallas 57, Portland 41. Now, this doesn't start well for Brandon Roy, as his first drive, he dribbles the ball off his foot out of bounds. Dallas builds to a 23-point lead at that point until Brandon Roy actually has his first point of the second half when he gets 1 out of 2 at the free throw line. Roy rattles in a 3 at the end of the third, but Dallas still leads by 18 going into the fourth quarter. Nothing brewing. It looks like Dallas is still in control. Just a nice 3 at the buzzer. Gave a little momentum to Portland, but it's still an 18-point lead. So in this fourth quarter, though, Brandon Roy will shoot 8 of 9 from the field for 18 points. And it's not even just the scoring. He gets into the teeth of the defense, is finding guys, diming guys up. Masterful performance. Looked absolutely like a throwback to when he was an all-star and one of the best shooting guards in the league. Roy actually scores 12 of his points in the final 4 minutes, 6 including in the final 90 seconds. He gets a 4-point play when Sean Marion fouls him on a closeout while Roy is shooting a 3. Just fantastic stuff. Just fantastic stuff. Makes the final go-ahead bucket with a bank shot over Sean Marion with 39 seconds left. Now, I'm going to praise Rick Carlisle a lot throughout this series, but for some reason, Dirk doesn't get a shot in the last minute. I'm pretty sure if Rick Carlisle would go back and watch this series, that's something he would definitely want to change. Jason Terry and Jason Kidd get a couple good looks, but neither go in. Roy's the hero. He's almost in tears at the end. One of the most memorable games in Portland Trailblazers history. Super inspirational. But it's also kind of bittersweet in that you know this is it. Brandon Roy would come back and try to play in Minnesota to revive his career a couple years later, but it didn't happen. He was gone. His knees were gone. This was the last moment that showed his Hall of Fame talent. I believe he would have been a Hall of Famer if he'd been able to stay healthy. He was that level of talent. Now, on the flip side, though, you have to think about this from Dallas's end. They were about to go up 3-1, clearly demonstrating they were the best team, built a 23-point lead, and completely blew it in the fourth quarter, and now it's a 2-2 series. Now, Dallas still has the home court advantage, having games 5 and 7 at home, but it looks like here we go again. Dallas was up 2-0 against Miami. Nope, didn't matter. Lost 4 straight after Dwayne Wade went crazy and played fantastic. So it was easy at this point to then start patting yourself on the back because I did it, thinking that Dallas was going to choke and we were going to see Portland just like everybody had picked, just like a lot of us had picked. But according to a lot of players on the Dallas team, this was a turning point for them. This was the point where they said, no, we're not doing this. We're not going down this road again. And the next 2 games, as amazing and classic as Game 4 is for Brandon Roy, and it's been a fun series throughout. I think one of the things that goes a little under the radar is how fun this Dallas team was to watch. We talk a lot about the 7 seconds or less Suns, and even the 2009 Magic, with how they shot threes and kind of pushed the pace. This Dallas team does that completely. They are probably a closer example of a team what we see a modern NBA offense than what even the Suns were at the time. Those Steve Nash Suns were. Super fun team to watch. This Blazer team, tough young team. As I said, one of these days I want to do a podcast on Brandon Roy. I definitely want to do a podcast on the post-Oden Blazers. There's a lot of interesting and amazing stuff in there that I think goes missed. It just kind of jumps from the story seems to just jump from Greg Oden to kind of a morass to then getting Damian Lillard, which Gerald Wallace actually helps with. Probably his biggest contribution to the franchise, and definitely not probably. So games 5 and 6, there's not, actually a little bit similar to games 1 and 2 in that the games are close, and that Portland puts up a fight. They don't. It doesn't just go where they have their one defiant act in game 4, and just simply the trend throughout the series was that Dallas was the better team and that they were getting more consistent offense, better offense, not having to scramble to try to stay in games and fight back in leads. And you really see that trend take over the rest of the series. In game 5, it's oddly actually both teams are a little flat. The Blazers have an early lead, kind of goes back and forth. Dallas pulls away at the end. And then game 6, pretty similar. Portland leads early, Dallas withstands it, back and forth. Dallas pulls away in the end. You feel like if you play this series 10 times, it probably goes 7 games, maybe 4 or 5 of the times, but Dallas wins all 10. And I'm always impressed when a team can go from being up 3-2, having won game 5 at home, to then go on the road and close out. It is so easy, and you see it happen time and time again, when teams will get that 3-2 lead and then know they have game 7 at home in the bank, and game 6 is a write-off game. Dallas doesn't do that here. They put Portland away and move on to the second round on the road. Now, one of the questions I said I wanted to answer was how good Dirk was in this run. Now, he averages 27 points and 8 rebounds for the series. But his shooting isn't actually that super efficient in this series. His numbers are down from his regular season totals. Nicholas Batum actually does a really good job guarding Dirk throughout this series. It's a battle for him. You can see he giving up size with Dirk is hard for Batum, but he has good length and he makes Dirk work for his points. Both Dirk's field goal percentage and true shooting stats take a dip in this series. I would actually argue that Jason Kidd was a big reason the Dallas Mavericks won and were consistently better in each game. I think he was the best guard in the series. If you set aside Brandon Roy's performance in Game 4, Jason Kidd outplayed Andre Miller for sure. I mean, his points went up almost 4 a game. He shot better than he did in the regular season. The time off that Rick Carlisle gave him obviously really helped. Sad thing is, if you look throughout the series, where Brandon Roy ends up averaging 9 points a game throughout this series. He had 24 points in that Game 4, so that tells you the other 5 games were pretty uneventful. Now, LaMarcus Aldridge, it's not just Dirk. This was a kind of a little bit of a defensively contested series. LaMarcus Aldridge would play well, but his shooting percentage would drop as well. Definitely the first time he started to look like an all-star to what we see today. So with that, Dallas survives the first test, right? Everyone doubted them. They beat the team they were supposed to beat, really. They had the better record, the best player in the series. Dallas, on paper at least, should have beaten Portland. It shouldn't be surprised that the 3 ever beats the 6. But waiting for Dallas in the second round is going to be Kobe and the defending champion Lakers. The Lakers will have home court advantage despite having an identical 57-25 record because of beating Dallas 2-1 in the regular season and having the season series tiebreaker. I think if you were to have given everyone truth serum back in 2011 going into the playoffs, even fans of other teams would have picked the Lakers to be the team to win the title. They hadn't looked great in the regular season. They looked a little sleepy. They'd been inconsistent. Kobe hurt his ankle earlier in the year. But Chicago and Miami were new to this and looked shaky and untested. Boston had just lost them the year before. And this was a point before everyone started believing in the Spurs again, even though they won 60 games, which ends up being the right assumption to make considering they lose to the 8th-seeded Grizzlies in the first round and their matchup. If you go on ESPN, which is always fun to do, and go back and look at their predictions before the series, every single person on ESPN picks the Lakers to win. Now, some pick it in 7, some pick it in 6, but everyone picks the Lakers to win. The biggest storyline going into this series probably had to do with the fact that not only was Kobe going for his 6th ring, but also another three-peat, but that Phil Jackson actually was saying this was it for him. This was the last season he was going to coach. He is expected to retire at the end of this year. This is the last stand for the winningest coach of all time. What's amazing before this series is I had not known this either, that this is the only time Dirk and Kobe ever met in the playoffs. It's almost kind of an amazing coincidence that they never played a series with how good Dallas had been in the early 2000s. And, of course, the Lakers at this point had won 5 championships in that time frame, both in the Western Conference. Just worked out that every year the seeding worked out to where Dallas was either in another bracket or didn't face the Lakers or vice versa. This year, the Lakers had Lamar Odom win 6th Man of the Year. I think Andrew Bynum definitely finally looked a little bit healthy this year. Throughout this series, one thing that is amazing to go back and watch is see just how talented Andrew Bynum was for the Lakers and why they were so reluctant to trade him for Jason Kidd back in 2007, oddly enough. Now, going into the series, the Lakers did not look like world beaters. They had just won 6 games with Chris Paul and the Hornets, back when they were the New Orleans Hornets, not the New Orleans Pelicans. In the first round, they had lost Game 1 of that series. Looked like if New Orleans had had even a little bit more talent, that the Lakers may have lost that series. Chris Paul gave them a lot of problems off the dribble. They were really having a hard time guarding point guards, even throughout their whole run, but it really was a problem this year. And before I get to Game 1, I do want to just say I'm going to say some things about Kobe Bryant that I don't want to have come off as in poor taste. It is still very emotional watching Kobe Bryant. It is unreal that he is no longer with us. It's something you have to remind yourself of, oddly enough. When you watch it, you're just like, oh yeah, that guy passed away earlier this year. And it is still very raw. And so when I talk about this, I'm talking about the player. I still have immense respect for him. He's one of my favorite basketball players ever. But there are some criticisms in this series. And that's the point of what we're doing. We're just talking about the basketball side of this. As a human being, I just want to say that this is not in any disrespect towards Kobe Bryant and his memory. What I say in here is just strictly about basketball. So with that, I'm going to move into game one and talk about the actual series. Early on, you can see Dallas gets a lot of easy shots against the Lakers defense, but the size of Los Angeles gets them a bit out of rhythm in the second quarter. One aspect of the Lakers I think a lot of people forget about, especially this version of it with the Gasol-Kobe era, was Gasol's interior passing to the other bigs and also to other players on the floor. But a lot of times, like, you would see him catch the ball, say at like the free throw line, make a move, and his ability to find the other big on the floor, either be Andrew Bynum or Lamar Odom or whoever, is just spectacular. I think you'd see him used differently in today's game, where he might actually be a hub of offense, similar to what his brother was at times in Memphis. He'll end up having a bit of a rough series, but in this first half, Pau Gasol is fantastic. With getting out of rhythm in the second quarter and having a bit of problems with LA's size and Gasol's passing, you see the Lakers build a 16-point lead early in the third quarter. But Dallas actually comes back pretty quickly and cuts that lead down by turning the Lakers over and getting out in transition. Now, it'll get worse in the series from here for the Lakers, but the Lakers' inability to play fast and up-tempo really is what kills them in this series and why they'll end up losing. They're too big and too slow. If Dallas gets a turnover in transition, 3 Dallas players are down the floor before 2 defenders for the Lakers are in transition. What really is the biggest bright spot of this game for the Lakers is Kobe has a hell of a game. He hits all kinds of tough long twos that are vintage Kobe Bryant. Lakers are still up 7 heading into the fourth quarter. This is where you'll start seeing J.J. Barea getting into the paint at will for Dallas. It'll be a harbinger of things to come in this series, but as soon as J.J. breaks the first line of defense on the perimeter, he's got multiple options, no help defense from the Lakers, able to get to the rim or to find shooters all over the floor. For years, you would see people praise Phil Jackson, that he would ride his bench, was confident that they could be able to either keep him in a game or actually fight back and win games for him. He had great luck with that when the Chicago Bulls in the 1992 finals against the Blazers in Game 6, where he set Michael Jordan out for a long time. That actually ended up paying off. But in this game, I believe he keeps Kobe out on the bench in the fourth quarter a little bit too long. Dirk starts to get with some momentum and is great, makes big, tough shots late, is every bit Kobe's equal down the stretch. Also, great ball movement from Dallas. Swing passes. Just, it's super pretty to watch. I will harp on this through this entire series on this 2011 finals, that Dallas is a very underrated team in terms of just being a fun team to watch. Smart guys all over the floor, shooting, and Dirk's just brilliant. Dirk eventually puts Dallas ahead with 2 huge free throws, 95-94. Kobe falls down and causes a turnover with a Gasol handoff, trying to free Kobe for a jumper. Lakers foul. Jason Kidd hits 1 of 2 free throws, 96-94, with 3.1 seconds left. Now, this ends up being a really, really under-talked about missed shot in NBA history. As I said earlier, everybody has said that the Lakers are going to win this series. They're the favorites. They're probably going to win another title. Kobe has 36 points. Dirk has 28 points and 14 rebounds for the game. And Kobe gets free for a straight-on 3-point shot from the wing, and it just doesn't go in. If that shot goes in, Kobe has 39 points for this game, is completely dominant, best player on the floor. Everybody's talking about how fantastic the Lakers are. They're going to win the title again. Dallas. The same thing we saw with Brandon Roy, but against higher level competition than the Blazers. I believe if Kobe makes that shot, and the Lakers win that game one, this whole series could have been different. And this means that whole playoffs could have been different. And if Kobe makes this shot, if the Lakers win, and the Lakers are able to then be the Death Star, be the team they were everybody thought they were, maybe some of what happens in the next 3 games of this series doesn't quite happen, and maybe Dallas doesn't get the confidence that they end up playing with. But Kobe does miss, and Dallas steals game 1 on the road after being down 16 points in the third quarter. So we'll move on to game 2. The Lakers' size continues to give Dallas some problems in the half court. Really, one missed opportunity in this series. I do think they should have featured Bynum and Gasol a lot more. The Lakers usually get something good every time when they go to the Gasol and Bynum down low. But this is one of the underrated series I think people don't talk about enough when we see why the game has become what it is. The Lakers are actually kind of archaic. They have no real shooting on the floor. Their starting lineup, you have Derek Fisher, Kobe Bryant, and Ron Artest on the wings, none of which are actual knockdown shooters. Kobe's going to take a lot of long twos. Fisher can make clutch shots, but he's not going to get them up at high volume. Artest is pretty similar. You start seeing that really come to fold in game 2. This would actually probably be a good series for people to go back and watch, who are always insistent that today's teams could not match up with the size of the older teams we used to watch. This Laker team has the size, not that exactly Dallas is super small, but the Lakers have a huge size advantage in this series, and Dallas runs them off the floor with shooting and playing up tempo. So for those of you that always say the Warriors wouldn't beat any of the old teams, you might want to go back and take a look at this series and see a team that played slow it down, pound it in, long two basketball, and how they fared against a team that plays up tempo and shoots a lot of threes. In this game, I really feel you start seeing Dallas's confidence growing. I think in this game, they start really feeling that they are going to beat the Lakers, that the Lakers just cannot keep up with their attack. Going back and watching this series, I will say that this is true for game 2 here, that Kobe and Dirk, it's just spectacular shot making. Kobe doesn't have a huge game like he did in game 1, but some of the shots he makes are just ridiculous. You really start seeing, though, the Lakers getting tight in the fourth quarter, cannot keep J.J. Barea out of the paint. He gets to the rim and open shots for his teammates at will. In the last few minutes, it really feels like the Lakers are a bit stunned and surprised that it looks like they're going to go down 0-2, having home court advantage, losing the first 2 games in Los Angeles. There's not a lot of fight. They fall apart in the last few minutes, and that includes Kobe. And what will eventually be a sign of things to come, Artest cheap shots J.J. Barea towards the end of the game. We will see more of that down the line. Dallas will ultimately win fairly comfortably, 93-81, to put the Lakers in an 0-2 hole, heading to Dallas for games 3 and 4. If you were to make an argument that this series was going to go beyond the 4-game sweep it ultimately is, spoiler alert, Game 1 and Game 3 are probably the ones you would point to saying the Lakers could have extended this series. The Lakers will end up controlling most of Game 3, lead by 6 heading into the fourth quarter, and you start really feeling the idea that if the Lakers can win this game, if the Lakers can win, still down 2-1, but have Game 4 in Dallas, with Dallas having all the pressure of needing to win to go up 3-1 instead of it being a 2-2 series, heading back with games 5 and 7 being in Los Angeles. And I don't feel any crack from Dallas. I remember watching this game and starting to feel like that this is really when I started to believe that Dallas was going to beat the Lakers and make the conference finals. Even though they won the first 2 games in Los Angeles, it was the Lakers, it was Kobe, and I didn't buy that. I still didn't buy. I was not a believer in Dallas, and this game really started me to go, oh crap, they're actually going to do this. They're going to beat the Lakers, and they're probably going to make the NBA Finals. Another interesting aspect of this game, though, is I don't know if it's because he knows that this Lakers team is not going to be able to beat Dallas, or if it's because of his ankle or what, but Kobe Bryant has another game where he doesn't put up a lot of fight down the stretch. This was a close game, and if he had taken control in the fourth quarter, the Lakers could have easily won this game. The ultimate score will be 98-92, and the Lakers will end up leading by 7 with 5 minutes left to go. But you start seeing a lot of trading twos for threes. Peja Stojakovic has a lot of big shots going down the stretch. Jason Terry hits a big three with 2 minutes remaining. Dirk will end up with 32 points on 12 of 19 shooting. Kobe doesn't get a shot in the last 2 minutes until a desperate three down 6. And that's it. It's actually Dallas is up 3-0 heading home to Game 4. That's the last competitive part of this series. And it's the Lakers go out with a whimper. There's not a lot of fight from anybody. There's not any fire from Kobe. I think going into Game 4, everybody knew this was over. In fact, most of what people talked about going into Game 4 was that this was most likely going to be Phil Jackson's last game as a head coach. And it has, to this point, proven to be his last game. Game 4, it's an elimination game, obviously. Elimination games often go one of two ways. A team will accept their fate, especially when it'll go one of two ways, especially when a team, it's not a Game 7 or a Game 6 or somewhere where you actually have a chance in the series. When you're down 0-3 and you go into Game 4, either a team will be defiant and want to not get swept and come out trying and be super aggressive, or it'll go the other way and teams will sometimes just accept their fate. That is certainly what happens with the Lakers here. There is not a lot of fight. They are not defiant. It's not actually much of a game. Dallas is aggressive, knowing the opportunity they have. And the Lakers look ready to go home. Peja Stojakovic has a great game. Probably his biggest contribution of the playoffs for Dallas. He goes 6 for 6 for 3. Can't miss. If you want to know why the Mavericks swept the Lakers, you could really just look at this stat. For the series, Dallas Mavericks made 49 threes. The Lakers made 15. That's it. That's the series. That kind of advantage from 3, you can't overcome that. Now, the only other kind of interesting actual aspect of this game is it's overlooked, and people have forgotten this. Everybody talks about how the Pistons walked off the floor and were sore losers when they lost Chicago in 1991 in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Lakers act like punks in this game. Lamar Odom ends up getting ejected for getting a technical foul, trying to rough Dirk up on a screen. And especially weak is J.J. Barea's driving to the basket, and Andrew Bynum just comes in and clocks him with an elbow and knocks him to the ground. It is such a bully, pathetic, sorry, whatever word you want to say. J.J. Barea is maybe 5'7". Andrew Bynum is, 7 feet? Who knows? Huge. And so because you couldn't keep him out of the lane, he gives him a cheap shot on the way out. Andrew Bynum gets ejected, takes his jersey off, walks out with his shirt off. One of the more poor sportsmanship moments, and I think it's a little bit forgotten, at that moment when Bynum knocks Barea to the ground, the Lakers are down by 32. So it's not like you're giving me a hard foul in a competitive game. It's over. You're going home. It's just a cheap shot on a guy that's, like I said, 5'7". Maybe. When the game's over, the Mavericks win 122-86, by the way. When the game's over, you start seeing the cameras not even really focusing on the fact that the Mavericks are going to the Western Conference Finals. The cameras pretty much stay with Phil Jackson. Because, this is a legend, right? This is the most winning coach in NBA history, and this was his last game. And it's kind of a little bit sad, because I think we didn't know this at the time, but this was the last real contending team that Kobe Bryant had. Now, Dwight Howard would come in 2013, and Steve Nash would come, but Steve Nash would get hurt, and Dwight Howard and Kobe never got along. Dwight had back problems. He ended up going to Houston after 1 year. Never again, after 2012, did people really look at the Lakers heading into a playoffs, right? I think starting 2013, when they got Dwight and they got Steve Nash, people were talking about them winning a title. But when they actually played basketball and were heading into a postseason, no one really thought the Lakers were winning a title again after this season. This was it for Kobe in terms of actually chasing rings. He would end up with 5 championships, the same he had here. He never would get his 6th ring. And in this series, Dirk ends up being the best player in the series. He has 25 points, 9 rebounds on 57% shooting in this 4-game sweep. Just special. Just special. Now I'm going to talk about Kobe. Kobe in this series averaged 23 points on 46% shooting and 26% from 3. Now, if you look at that, that's not horrible. It's not spectacular, but If you take out the 36 points that he had in Game 1, the final 3 games, Kobe averaged 19 points. In Game 1, where he scores his 36 points, he took 29 shots to get them. The rest of the series, he shoots 54 shots. A lot of people, when they criticize Kobe's playoff record, they'll point to either the 04 finals or the first round series against Phoenix in 2006 as examples of Kobe not coming through for his team. And I think this series gets a little bit of a short shrift. There is no fight after Game 1. Like I said earlier, maybe it was his ankle, but there's no resistance at the end of games when there were opportunities in this series to make it at least probably a 6 or 7 game series if the Lakers can get a couple baskets when they needed them. And it doesn't happen. As I said earlier, before I start talking about the games, this is no disrespect to Kobe, but this is absolutely a mark on his playoff resume. If we're going to talk about LeBron James, and we will, we have to mention that the Dallas Mavericks did the same thing almost to Kobe Bryant. Jason Kidd does a really good job. Bothers Kobe, makes him take a lot of tough shots. It's more the lack of fight that was stunning for me to go back and watch it. I knew that Dirk had outplayed him in this series, but going back and seeing it, it wasn't even really that close as the numbers say. So with that, Dallas is going to move on to face Oklahoma City in the Western Conference Finals. Oklahoma City arrives in the conference finals a little bit ahead of schedule. They're super young. Kevin Durant looks like a baby at this point when you go back and look at it. Looks like he can barely grow facial hair. But they ended up getting not exactly a lucky bounce in the second round. They ended up getting the early grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies that ended up going 7 games. But even though they are super young, the talent on the floor is just staggering. At this point, Harden and Westbrook are starting to round into what looks like they're going to be good players. Serge Ibaka is actually starting to peak and seem like he's going to be a really good big. And, of course, Kevin Durant has already led the league in scoring. We had a really big moment in the FIBA World Championship in 2010 where he was the best player on that team that won the FIBA Championship for USA. So the Oklahoma City's record this year was 55-27. So Dallas ends up having home court in this series. When we start Game 1, you really sense from the very start that Dirk is sensing this is his shot. This is his chance to win a championship, and maybe might be his best chance, and definitely could be his last. I don't believe, no matter what they say, you'll hear throughout the broadcast and throughout when you read the old recaps of the games, that they knew they were going to win. They always thought they could win a championship. Jason Terry got the tattoo on his arm of the Larry O'Brien trophy. I do not believe that the Mavericks really thought they could win a title until they beat the Lakers. Until it was obvious, until their path to the finals was clear and they just had a young team. Oklahoma City's athletic and super talented, but they were not ready to make it to the NBA Finals in 2011. And I think Dallas knew it. And Dirk definitely knew it. At this point, you have to remember, Dirk hasn't won a championship, obviously, but neither has Jason Kidd, neither has Sean Marion, neither has Jason Terry, and neither is Tyson Chandler. All of these guys are sensing this is their chance to really do it. And you can feel it when you watch it, and you could feel it at the time. Going back and looking at Oklahoma City this early, this young of a team, is a bit of a trip. They were much better on D than they were on offense at this point. They had a lot of length, not a lot of great ball movement, which is probably actually true of the entire run for Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City, but definitely better athletes than Dallas faced in either the first round against Portland or the second round against the Lakers. You start looking at this, when you watch it, it really is staggering how much talent this Thunder team had. You had Russell Westbrook. Looks like Durant looks like a baby. James Harden just starting to get the beard going on. Kevin Durant and Serge Ibaka. You got those 4 guys. Serge Ibaka, not an MVP like the other 3, but still a really good role player, really good big. Just amazing that you would never watch this game and think this team only made 1 NBA Finals and never won a title together. Just staggering. In this game, in game one, Durant is breathtaking. We talk a lot about Giannis, but Durant is basically Giannis with a jump shot. Throughout his career, I'm not entirely sure Durant's taken advantage quite enough of how hard he is to guard when he puts the ball on the floor. You see him in a lot of transition spots in this game, and it is like watching Giannis today. Giannis plays with more force, where Durant's more has more finesse, much more of a skilled game. Durant will actually have a really great game here, which I'll get into later. Oklahoma City actually comes in and is up 7 in game one going into the second quarter, but Dallas and starts moving the ball really well, and you see Dirk really picks it up in the second quarter, completely flips it, 14-point swing. Dallas goes into the second half up by 7. Now, this second half, I think, is really where the legend of Dirk's run in 2011 comes from. He played well against Portland. He played really well against the Lakers. But in this game, especially, he's just unstoppable. You start feeling bad for Serge Ibaka and Nick Collison, who gets a shot at him. He puts fouls on everybody. They cannot guard him in the low block. Just impossible. They'll try to run. After Ibaka and Collison keep picking up fouls on Dirk, they'll try to run Durant at him for a few minutes. That doesn't work. Durant picks up fouls. Eventually, they try to stick Cephalosha on him. Smaller, but he's got length. Can try to fight. Same thing. Picks up fouls. Dirk goes to the free-throw line a bunch in this game, and none of these foul calls. There's one Cephalosha gets hit with that I'm a little bit dubious on, but by and large, he's getting fouled every time. The defenders are fouling him when he takes the turnaround patented, that one-legged shot that Dirk's patented. They have no answer. That said, Oklahoma City doesn't get blown out in this game. It's actually a 5-point game with Dallas ahead with 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. Now, Dallas will ultimately put it away by making some free throws down the stretch, and it never really gets super in doubt. But when you're only down 5 with 3 minutes to go, you have a chance. I hate saying these things to this podcast, especially in this first episode, because this podcast is trying to not focus on these kind of narratives and these kind of hot take and attacks on players. Russell Westbrook costs the Thunder this game. He has 20 points. He actually gets 18 free throw attempts, which he'll make 14 of. You can see his unbelievable athleticism. He gets to the basket with such ferocity, but he has no plan of what to do when he gets there. He'll ultimately shoot 3 of 15 for the game. And he's not remotely the best guard on the floor. I would say that both J.J. Barea and Jason Terry for Dallas have much better, more efficient games than he does. And you really look at it and start thinking, if he's able to convert on a few more of those drives, this could easily have been a different game. And maybe the Thunder up 1-0 in this series. Like I said, I don't like saying these things about players. I think it's kind of reductive and lazy. But the game was actually close. And ultimately the score just ends up being 121 Dallas, 112 Oklahoma City. So Dirk ends up having one of the best games he'll ever have, probably the best game he ever had. And you only lose by 9, and you had your second best player go 3 for 15 from the field. That's a killer. It's especially hard when you look at Durant's overall game. Durant ended up with 40 points on 10 of 18 from the field. Actually makes 18 of 19 free throws. And is spectacular. But he's overshadowed by the fact that Dirk Nowitzki will have 48 points on 12 of 15 from the field. And make 24 of 24 free throws. Which is an NBA record for most free throws in a game without a miss. As skilled a performance as you will ever see from Dirk. If anybody listening to this hasn't watched it, go back and watch it. It is Hakeem Olajuwon-esque in how they have no answer for Dirk. And how skilled. He's not overpowering people. It's hours and hours of work that leads to this kind of performance. And it is awesome to watch. One of the best performances you will ever see. And with that, we'll go to Game 2 with Dallas leading 1-0 in the series. Dallas will come out early and establish control. Other than Durant getting a really nice dunk in the first quarter on Brendan Haywood, not a whole lot going until the second quarter, where Oklahoma City starts to fight back and take the lead. Oklahoma City will build it up to an 8-point lead in the third quarter and also lead going into the fourth, eventually getting up by 10 points with 3:15 to go. Ultimate score ends up being 106-100. Oklahoma City ties the series. First Dallas loss of the playoffs at home. James Harden really comes up big in game 2 for Oklahoma City. 23 points off the bench, 6 of 9 shooting for 4 threes. Really, if you look at it, this series could have been 2-0 with Oklahoma City going home, having that lead. Dirk being huge in game 1. Oklahoma City has fought and gave them all they can handle. Dirk has a bit of a come down, actually, from his ridiculous game 1. Still ends up with 29 points, but not the unstoppable monster performance he had in the first game. One story coming out of this game was actually Westbrook gets benched the entire fourth quarter, and Eric Maynor plays instead. Now, I don't know, some of you may not remember Eric Maynor. I was actually, for some reason, I cannot remember why, but I do remember that I liked Eric Maynor and thought he was going to be part of the Thunder's future. Didn't turn out that way. I thought he'd at least be a good backup point guard, but he's not in the league anymore. But Eric Maynor actually helped stabilize the team in a way that Westbrook hasn't been able to with his erratic play, and the Thunder hold on to win. The one thing that's interesting when you look at this game, though, is the alternate universe idea that somewhere there's a timeline where instead of trading James Harden to Houston, Sam Presti and Oklahoma City Thunder decide to go with Durant and Harden. Fascinating to think about what that actually could have been, and if it would have been better than what we ultimately got with Westbrook and Durant. But ultimately, it works out for Oklahoma City. They have a 1-1 series going home and seem to have actual momentum. Now, that said, Game 3, Oklahoma City comes out as cold as you possibly can be. They miss everything. They turn the ball over several times. They dig a hole that they never really get out of until the fourth quarter. Dallas takes full advantage, has a big lead throughout most of the game. The one thing I remembered about this game from when I watched it originally was one of the greatest flops I have ever seen in my life committed by James Harden, and it does not disappoint on rewatch. Tyson Chandler grabs a rebound in the third quarter, securing it with both hands. James Harden runs his face into Tyson Chandler's elbow and falls down like he's been shot, holding his face on the ground like he has just been elbowed in the face. And Tyson Chandler gets a flagrant one, or a technical foul, not a flagrant, but it's hilarious to watch. One of the all-time acting jobs, and definitely what you'd see more of in Houston from James Harden. OKC actually cuts the lead down to 6 with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, but Dallas holds that lead to win ultimately 93-87, putting him up 2-1 in the series. Durant shoots 7 of 22 for 24 points. Westbrook gets 30 on 8 of 20, and Harden only goes 2 of 9 for 7 points. No one for Oklahoma City plays well in Game 3, but they still had a chance, which will now lead us to Game 4, which is actually a bit of a classic. OKC comes out with a much better start than they did in Game 3. They're hitting everything. Durant is great early. He goes 5 for 5 for 10 points in the first 4 minutes of the game. It's all OKC, but Dallas holds tight. They stay in the game. Like throughout this run, that's one thing you do see when a team comes out and gives Dallas a punch. Dallas doesn't wilt. And at the end of the first quarter, Oklahoma City leads 31-22. But it could have been a lot worse with how hot Oklahoma City was shooting to start the game. In the second quarter, Oklahoma City really starts to threaten to build a big lead, but Dirk's able to make timely, tough shot buckets to keep Dallas within striking distance. Everything for Dallas at this point is hard. This is probably the best that Oklahoma City plays in the whole series. Great D. Really feels like we're going to see a 2-2 series at this point, and that Dallas is really going to have to fight to win this one, and we're looking like it's going to be a 7-game series. That said, Dirk has a huge quarter, shoots 5 for 5, doesn't miss. It's a lot of free throws, ends up with 17 points. to have the Oklahoma City lead cut to 5 at the half, 59-54, going into this third quarter. Oklahoma City rebuilds their lead in the third quarter. They eventually get up to 70-61. Dallas cuts the lead back. Going into the fourth quarter, Oklahoma City's lead shrinks, but is still a 4-point lead at 81-77. And then the start of the fourth quarter is all Oklahoma City. Ultimately, they are up 15 points with 4 minutes and 49 seconds left to go in the game. It definitely looks like they are going to win this game and tie the series. Well, Dallas starts to claw back, but they're still down 10 with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. After that, Dirk drills a trailing 3 to cut the lead to 7 with 2 minutes and 21 seconds left. Next play, Jason Terry fouls Russell Westbrook with 2:11 left on the clock, and Russell Westbrook misses both free throws. Then down the floor, Dirk hits a ridiculous one-handed shot over Nick Collison to cut the lead to 5. 2 minutes remaining, and honestly, he was probably fouled. Should have been going to the free throw line for a 3-point play. Another Russell Westbrook missed jumper. Dirk comes down, jump shot, cuts it to 3 with 1:26 remaining. Russell Westbrook misses another jumper. He then fouls Sean Marion on an over-the-back call, chasing an offensive rebound. 39 seconds left. Marion makes 1 of 2. The score is now 101-99. Oklahoma City with the lead. Durant finds Thabo Sefolosha in the corner for a nice play and a 3, but it's short. Doesn't go in. Dirk then ties the game at the free throw line, 6.4 seconds left. Now, the next 3-4 seconds actually have one of my favorite plays in NBA history. Durant takes an awful 30-foot 3 to win the game, and Sean Marion blocks it. Jason Kidd grabs the loose ball, and what would 99.9% of players do at this point? There's about 1 second on the clock, ends up being 0.7. Jason Kidd calls for a timeout. Almost every single NBA player is going to just grab the loose ball and prepare for overtime and celebrate that they got the stop. Jason Kidd had the presence of mind to call a timeout and get his team another chance to win regulation. Unfortunately, all they can really get is a lob to Sean Marion that gets broken up, and we are going to overtime. I wasn't rooting for either team at this point, but I so was disappointed that didn't pay off because of how brilliant that was from Jason Kidd. One of my all-time favorite plays, and I've never forgotten it. Towards the start of overtime, Dirk actually gives Dallas its first lead at the free throw line. At this point, Oklahoma City had led wire to wire, or there was a tie. Dallas had never led in the game. The action slows down a bit in overtime. Dallas will ultimately hold their advantage at the free throw line, winning 112-105, and are now up 3-1, looking to close it out in Game 5 and head to the NBA Finals. Dirk finishes with 40 points on 12 for 20 shooting. Another spectacular game, as clutch as it gets. In the second quarter, he's amazing. And down the stretch, when they cut that 15-point lead down to tie and go to overtime, the shots he hits are ridiculous. They are the hardest degree, the toughest degree of difficulty shots you can have. Just spectacular. And really, really big plays defensively from Sean Marion and Jason Kidd in this game. Deflections, steals, blocks, just really, really clutch defensive plays from both of those guys. At the start of Game 5, I was really impressed with how Oklahoma City doesn't just show up and lay down. They come out with fight. They do not accept that they're going to lose this series, especially after such a loss that had to be emotionally deflating to everybody, being up 15 with 4:49 left in Game 4. It's a back-and-forth game again. Oklahoma City holds the lead several times. Goes to formula, though. Dirk gets a big 3 with 1:15 remaining to give Dallas the lead for good. The big story of this game, though, that everyone remembers is after Dallas wins 100-96, and they're getting the Western Conference trophy celebration, Dirk walks off the floor into the locker room. It was played at a time that they didn't want to celebrate winning the conference title. They wanted to celebrate the NBA title. Recently, though, it has been told that actually Dirk walks off the floor because he was in tears and didn't want to be seen crying on television. It's how much it meant to him. It's how much he knew this opportunity may never come again, and he had to seize it. Probably the most memorable conference championship moment ever. Probably not a huge long list there, but it is a really great moment and shows you how much Dallas wanted to win this year. So, to wrap up, Dallas is heading to the NBA Finals now. They've beaten 3 really good teams, and they're not going there by mistake. They beat everybody in their path. They're a really good team. We just have to see what kind of team is going to be waiting for them once they get there. So, that's it for episode 1 of the NBA Legacy Podcast. Next time, I will be bringing you Miami's side to this story and their road to the NBA Finals in 2011. That should be fun. You can follow me on Twitter at NBA Legacy Pod. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/NBA Legacy Pod. Pretty soon I should have a bonus episode up for any subscribers. I'm going to probably use the Patreon episodes more to talk about current NBA stuff. Probably starting with my awards picks. Seems like we're going to have an NBA season finish at some point here, but the awards probably won't be changed. I don't think we'll have too many what will still be considered regular season games. May just end up jumping into the playoffs whenever the league decides to reconvene. But thank you for listening, and until next time.